Hey everyone, and welcome back to The Pulse. We've had many questions from you about housing accessibility, so we thought, hey, let's talk to an expert. Today we chat with Bex D'Agnilli, a former shelter director in Vancouver's downtown east side. Her background is in the area of supporting people who are without a place to live, and we wanted to get her perspective. First up, we'll talk about risk factors for homelessness. Let's go to that conversation now. We are talking about housing today, and specifically, we're talking about housing accessibility in terms of risk factors for homelessness and types of housing. And the reason we're focusing on housing inaccessibility is because it is a common problem for all demographics around the world, but it's specifically something that people with disabilities have a difficult time finding resources to educate them and help them move forward. So some questions that I have that we'll address are, what are some of the risk factors? Like, what is going to put you in danger of being homeless? And what types of options are there for housing if you are homeless? So if we can just start with some of the risk factors, and this will go for both of you, really. What are some of the risk factors that you can think of or tell us about that might put someone in danger of being homeless?
One that I can think of is I know of several cases where people with disabilities have gotten into a relationship and they're like, I want to move out and be independent. So they move out with this other person. And then they find that the other person is abusive and they can't stay there. And then they can't go home either. And when they have nowhere to go, but they feel like it might be safer to just leave, that is one very unfortunate way that could lead to homelessness.
Yeah, for sure. I would say that's for women and children, that's a huge factor globally, but specifically in the Western world, that marital abuse and domestic violence, or just plain old situations where you don't want to be in that relationship because it's either toxic or not healthy for you, that's a huge, I've seen a huge populace of people become homeless that way. As regards to kind of like the risk factors in general, I mean, there's the paths to homelessness are as complex and as varied as the homeless population themselves. I mean, to try and define categories, I would say there's probably a top 10 that you could go with. And I would say the first and one of the highest ones, especially in Canada and in other big Western countries, would be mental health mixed with substance abuse. Often people have no understanding or no idea that they're actually having a mental health issue, or they're having general health issues, and they'll feel themselves overwhelmed, they'll feel themselves incapable, they'll feel themselves detaching from family or loved ones, they'll feel that they are the black sheep or that they are too much for their family, and that the only good thing in this situation would be to remove themselves to keep everyone else happy. And then often that starts pairing with the fact that, as you mentioned, having nowhere to go, but then fear, isolation, the want to numb the pain, falling in with the wrong crowd because now you're standing on a street corner asking people for directions to the nearest shelter, and then it's very easy to fall from feeling awful straight into the hands of something that might just numb you for the night. You might end up addicted. I mean, this is a textbook story for a huge population of people who become homeless, especially the ones who become homeless very quickly. As you said, then marital abuse, relationship breakdown, that I would say would come in at a swift, close second. Transitioning out of institutions is also a huge biggie. I mean, we often hear about the veterans and such who are coming out of, the army, come home and they have nowhere to go. They don't feel able to fit back in with family or community or society, because again, they feel isolated, disassociated, alone, and they have a need to remove themselves from the situation, issues of PTSD, issues with anger and not being able to function around families. But that also goes for people who are coming out of mental health institutes, who are coming out of rehab, who are coming out of prison. I mean, a lot of these people have no support network that's already set up for them. So often people are already detached from their family. If they go into prison, a lot of the times family will say, no, you're the bad apple, or you're the black sheep. We're not going to associate. You can't come back here. We're not going to support you in any way, which often just leads people back into crime anyway, because there's nowhere else to go. So they stick to what they know. But yeah, so you've got people coming out of prison and not having transitional housing because there's just not enough available. People coming out of mental health institutes or coming out of just general long-term hospitalization for any ailments. Again, for something that's a long-term ailment, generally we're talking some kind of rehab, either for the body or for the mind or for substance use. And again, people often feel ashamed. There's a stigmatism attached to that. So they don't always want to go back to friends and family because they'll feel they've already lent on them too much. So we, as someone who's worked in the shelter sector, I've had a lot of people turn up on the doorstep looking for a bed in a medical gown and nothing more. And it's something that's superbly shocking to see someone wandering down the street away from the hospital with nothing except a medical gown and maybe a jacket or a sweater if they're lucky to have gotten that back. So yeah, and especially in BC, I would say that's a huge issue because a lot of people get taken in with substance abuse or substance issues. Their clothes will often get cut off them and then they're just given a medical gown, and that's how people are discharged, or people will walk out for a cigarette and just keep on walking.
That's it for today's episode. We really hope you found it interesting. Next time we'll ask Bex about perspectives, barriers, and services. As always, if you have questions you'd like to discuss, or if you want to be a guest on the show, send an email to voa@pacificautismfamily.com. Link in the description. We look forward to hearing more of your great questions. And thanks for listening.